Governor Hyunwoo Park stood on the balcony of his office, watching the twin suns of Taeyang Prime paint the sky in shades of gold and orange. Below him, the city of New Seoul stretched across the valley like a glittering jewel. 12 million people called this place home, and today they were celebrating the Harvest Festival. The smell of roasted meat and sweet rice cakes drifted up from the streets. Children ran between the market stalls, their laughter mixing with traditional music that echoed off the tall buildings. Red and gold banners hung from every window, fluttering in the warm evening breeze. Hyunwoo smiled as he watched his daughter Ha-eun dance with other teenagers in the central plaza. At 17, she had her mother's bright eyes and his stubborn determination. She wanted to study engineering at the university next year, just like her friend Soo-jin Kim. Soo-jin was 25 and already one of the colony's best engineers. She had designed the new water treatment plants that kept New Seoul running smoothly. Right now she was helping set up the festival's fireworks display, her dark hair tied back as she worked with focused intensity. "Governor Park?" His assistant knocked on the door. "Your family is here for dinner." Hyunwoo nodded and stepped inside. His wife Min-ah had arrived with their younger son Jae-sung, who was only 12 but already showing interest in following his father into government service. They settled around the dinner table as the festival continued outside their windows. "The new farms are producing more food than we expected," Min-ah said, serving rice into their bowls. "The soil here is better than anything we had on Earth. And the mining operations are ahead of schedule too," Hyunwoo replied. "We might be able to send surplus materials back to Earth sooner than planned." Jae-sung looked up from his food. "Father, why did we leave Earth to come here?" It was a question many children asked. Hyunwoo had heard it countless times. "Earth was getting crowded, son. 40 billion people living on one planet. We came here to build something new to give humanity room to grow." Outside, the first fireworks began exploding in the sky. The family moved to the balcony to watch the display. Soo-jin's work was perfect. Each burst of light painted the darkness in brilliant colors while the crowd below cheered and clapped. Then the stars began to move. At first, Hyunwoo thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. But no, points of light were shifting position in the night sky, growing brighter as they descended toward the planet. His communicator buzzed urgently. "Governor Park, this is Defense Station Alpha. We have unknown ships entering our system. They're not responding to our signals." Hyunwoo's blood turned cold. "How many ships?" "Sir, our sensors are counting over 200 vessels. They're big, sir. Much bigger than anything in our fleet." The festival music stopped. People in the streets were pointing at the sky, their voices rising in confusion and fear. The moving lights were now clearly visible as massive ships, their hulls dark against the stars. "Get me Admiral Choi on Earth," Hyunwoo ordered. "Emergency channel." "Sir, the ships are jamming our long-range communications. We can't reach Earth." The alien ships settled into orbit around Taeyang Prime like predators surrounding their prey. Each vessel was easily 10 times larger than the biggest human warship. Their design was angular and aggressive, covered in what looked like weapon ports. Hyunwoo's communicator crackled to life. The voice that came through was cold and mechanical, speaking perfect Korean through some kind of translation device. "Humans of Taeyang Prime. This is War Commander Velthanor of the Velkari Dominion. Your species has spread beyond its home system without permission. This world now belongs to the Dominion." The governor's hand shook as he activated the colony's emergency broadcast system. His voice would reach every person on the planet. "This is Governor Park. Remain calm and return to your homes immediately." "This is not a drill." The alien voice continued its transmission. "You have 1 hour to evacuate this planet. Any humans remaining after that time will be eliminated. Your species is a contamination that must be cleansed." Down in the streets, panic was starting to spread. People ran toward their homes and emergency shelters. Parents grabbed their children, their faces white with terror. The festival decorations looked strange and out of place now, cheerful colors against a backdrop of fear. Soo-jin Kim was in the engineering center, frantically trying to boost their communication array. If they could just get one message to Earth, warn them about the attack. "Sir," came another voice over the communicator. 37 of our ships are moving to intercept. Admiral Dae-hyun Lee is leading the defense fleet." Hyunwoo knew those ships wouldn't be enough. The human vessels were designed for cargo transport and basic patrol duties. They weren't built for war against an advanced alien military. Tell Admiral Lee to focus on evacuating civilians, not fighting, he ordered. Get as many people off the planet as possible. The hour passed too quickly. Emergency shuttles launched from spaceports across the planet, packed with terrified families. But there were only enough ships to carry maybe 50,000 people. 12 million would be left behind. Ha-Yun burst into the governor's office with tears streaming down her face. Father, we have to go. The shuttles are leaving. I can't abandon the colony, he said quietly. These people trusted me to protect them. The evacuation ships are full, reported his assistant. We've got maybe 40,000 people off the planet. The aliens are demanding the rest surrender immediately. Hyunwoo activated the planetary defense grid, knowing it would be useless against the massive alien fleet, but he had to try. He had to show these creatures that humanity wouldn't simply roll over and die. The Velkari response was swift and merciless. Beams of superheated plasma began raining down from orbit, turning entire city blocks into molten glass. The beautiful towers of New Seoul collapsed like children's toys. The parks where families had picnicked just hours before became craters of melted rock. Sujin managed to reach one of the last evacuation pods, along with several other engineers. As her ship fled the dying planet, she watched through the viewport as her home world burned. Everything she had built, everything she had worked for, was being erased by alien weapons. Dae-hyun Lee had been a military officer before retiring to become a farmer on Taeyang Prime. Now he was back in uniform, commanding one of the evacuation ships as it desperately tried to reach the edge of the system. Behind him, the planet glowed like a miniature sun as the Velkari turned its surface into molten slag. Sir, we're detecting similar attacks on New Busan Terra Nova and Cheonan Station, his navigator reported. The aliens are hitting all our colonies at once. In the space of 6 hours, 45 million human beings died. 4 thriving worlds became dead rocks floating in space. The Velkari had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. Humanity was nothing more than an infestation to be eliminated. The few survivors who escaped carried recordings of the massacre. When those desperate transmissions finally reached Earth, they would change the course of human history forever. The peaceful species that had reached for the stars in hope and wonder was about to become something else entirely, something the galaxy had never seen before, something that would make the Velkari regret ever learning humanity's name. The emergency session of the United Earth Assembly had been running for 18 hours straight. Representatives from every nation sat in stunned silence as the recordings from the destroyed colonies played on the massive screens above them. The images were almost too horrible to believe. President Mi Young-kang stood at the podium, her face pale but determined. She had watched the footage dozens of times, but it never got easier. 45 million people, men, women, children, murdered simply for being human. The alien transmission was clear, she said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. They consider us a contamination. They don't want our territory or our resources. They want us dead. All of us. In the front row, Fleet Admiral Jin Ho Choi clenched his fists. He had spent 30 years building Earth's defense fleet, always preparing for this day while hoping it would never come. Now it was here, and humanity was woefully unprepared. We have confirmed that identical attacks occurred on all 4 of our major colony worlds, the president continued. New Seoul, New Busan, Terra Nova, and Cheonan Station. 12 million people on each world. Gone. A representative from the African Union raised her hand. What do we know about these Velkari? How many ships do they have? How advanced are they? Admiral Choi stood to answer. The survivors' reports indicate a fleet of over 200 warships attacked each colony. Their weapons can melt stone from orbit. Their ships are larger and more powerful than anything in our fleet. Then we negotiate, said the representative from New Europe. We find out what they want. We make a deal. They told us what they want, President Kang replied coldly. Our extinction. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some representatives demanded immediate military action. Others insisted on attempting diplomatic contact. A few suggested abandoning Earth and fleeing to distant star systems. President Kang raised her hand for silence. When the noise died down, she spoke 3 words that would become famous throughout human history. No more colonies. She paused, letting the words sink in. We're not running. We're not hiding. And we're certainly not negotiating with creatures who murdered 45 million innocent people. Today I am activating Protocol 7. The chamber fell silent again. Protocol 7 was humanity's total war contingency plan. It had been written decades earlier by military planners who hoped it would never be used. It transformed Earth's entire civilization into a single massive war machine. Within hours, the protocol was in effect. Every civilian factory on Earth and in the solar system received new orders. Car manufacturers began building spacecraft engines. Electronics companies started producing military computers. Asteroid mining operations switched to extracting materials for warship armor. The civilian economy effectively ceased to exist overnight. Stores closed as their workers reported to military production facilities. Schools became training centers for future ship crews. Even entertainment companies began creating propaganda to keep morale high during the coming war. Fleet Admiral Tae-jun was 73 years old and had been enjoying his retirement on Mars when the emergency call came. He had commanded Earth's forces during the Resource Wars 20 years earlier, turning a collection of separate national fleets into a unified military force. "They want me to do it again," he told his wife as he packed his uniform. "Build a fleet large enough to take on an alien empire." "How long will it take?" she asked. "I don't know, but however long it takes, it won't be long enough for the people who are already dead." Yoon arrived at Fleet Command to find chaos. Officers were trying to coordinate the massive industrial mobilization while also planning for a war against an enemy they knew almost nothing about. "What do we have to work with?" Yoon asked Admiral Choi. "The current fleet has 800 ships. Most are cargo haulers and patrol boats. We have maybe 50 real warships, and they're all 30 years old. And what do we need? To fight an empire that can field thousands of ships like the ones that destroyed our colonies. We need at least 500,000 warships, maybe more." The number seemed impossible, but across Earth's solar system, the industrial transformation was already beginning. On Luna, massive construction yards that had built generation ships were retooled to produce warships. In the asteroid belt, automated mining platforms began extracting metals at unprecedented rates. Soo-jin Kim arrived at Fleet Command 3 days after the attacks. She had barely slept since escaping from Taeyang Prime, but her technical knowledge of Valkyrie ships was desperately needed. "Their energy shields operate on a specific frequency," she explained to a room full of military engineers. "If we can design weapons that match that frequency, we might be able to turn their own shields against them." "How do you know so much about their technology?" asked one of the engineers. "I watched it kill everyone I ever knew," Soo-jin replied quietly. "I had a lot of time to study their ships while my world burned." She worked around the clock, designing new weapons and defensive systems based on her observations. Other survivors from the colonies provided additional intelligence. Slowly, humanity began to understand their enemy. The Valkyrie Dominion was ancient. They had been expanding across the galaxy for over 1,000 years, wiping out any species they encountered. They didn't take prisoners or negotiate treaties. They simply eliminated potential threats before those threats could become dangerous. "They've done this before," reported Dr. Junho Nam from the Intelligence Service. "We found records of at least 40 species that just disappeared from their home systems over the past millennium. The Valkyrie turned their worlds into dead rocks, just like they did to our colonies." Meanwhile, former Marine Colonel Dae-hyun Lee was training the first wave of new recruits. The man who had been growing vegetables on Taeyang Prime just weeks earlier was now preparing young people for the most brutal war in human history. "You volunteered. Because you're angry," he told a group of new Marines. "That's good. Stay angry. But remember, anger without discipline gets you killed. We're going to teach you how to channel that rage into something useful." The transformation of human society was remarkable and terrifying. Earth's population threw themselves into the war effort with an intensity that surprised even their leaders. Factories ran 24 hours a day. Research laboratories pushed the boundaries of physics to develop new weapons. Even children contributed by collecting scrap metal for the war effort. 6 months after the attacks, the first new warships began rolling off the production lines. They were sleek, deadly vessels incorporating everything humanity had learned about Valkyrie technology. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who had lost family or friends in the colony attacks. But Admiral Yoon knew that ships alone wouldn't be enough. They needed a strategy to take on an empire that controlled hundreds of star systems. "We can't fight them the way they expect," he told his senior staff. "They've been conquering civilizations for centuries. They know how to handle conventional tactics. What do you suggest?" asked Admiral Choi. We don't try to match them ship for ship. We become something they've never fought before. We become a nightmare. As the second wave of warships began construction, human intelligence networks activated agents across known space. Some were traders who had contacts with alien species. Others were scientists who had studied galactic politics. All of them began gathering information about the Velkari Dominion. What they discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. The Dominion was powerful beyond imagination, controlling resources from 400 star systems. But they were also arrogant. They had never faced serious resistance from any species they attacked. "They think we're just another primitive civilization," reported Agent Youngmi Park from her assignment near Velkari space. "They expect us to either surrender or die quietly. They have no idea what's coming." 1 year after the massacre, humanity's transformation was complete. The peace-loving species that had reached for the stars with hope and wonder no longer existed. In its place was something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Admiral Yoon stood in the command center of the new fleet headquarters, watching as reports came in from across the solar system. 500,000 warships were now ready for deployment. Each one carried crews burning with the desire for revenge. "Sir," reported his aide, "the fleet is assembled and ready for your orders." Yoon looked at the tactical display showing the massive armada of human warships. It was the largest military force in the history of their species. Maybe the largest in galactic history. "Set course for Velkari space," he ordered. "It's time to teach them what happens when you murder human children." The great fleet began to move, 500,000 ships carrying humanity's fury toward an unsuspecting enemy. The Velkari had awakened something they didn't understand, something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever, something that would make them pay for every human life they had taken. 2 years had passed since the massacre at New Sol. The massive human fleet moved through space like a dark tide, 500,000 warships arranged in perfect formation. At the center of this armada flew the flagship Earth's Vengeance, where Admiral Taejun Yoon planned humanity's first strike against the Velkari Dominion. Captain Sujin Kim stood on the bridge of her ship, Taeyang's Revenge. The experimental warship was her own design, built specifically to fight Velkari vessels. Its weapons could turn enemy shields into deadly traps, and its armor was made from materials that absorbed energy weapons. "Captain," reported her tactical officer, "we're receiving the final attack orders from the Admiral." Sujin nodded. After 2 years of preparation, they were finally going to strike back. The target was Kethmoran, a massive Velkari fortress that guarded the approach to their core territories. Intelligence reports said it was defended by over 3,000 alien warships. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Prepare for battle." Across the fleet, similar preparations were taking place. Sergeant Major Dae Hyun Lee was briefing his Marines aboard the assault ship New Sol's Fury. The 1st Colonial Vengeance Battalion was made up entirely of survivors from the destroyed colonies and volunteers who had lost family in the attacks. "Listen up," Dae Hyun told his troops. "Today we show the galaxy what happens when you murder human children. These aliens think we're weak. They think we'll run or hide when faced with superior force. They're about to learn how wrong they are." The Marines checked their weapons one final time. Each soldier carried equipment designed specifically for fighting Velkari forces. Their armor could resist alien energy weapons, and their rifles fired rounds that could punch through enemy ship hulls. "Remember," Dae Hyun continued, "we're not just fighting for revenge. We're fighting to make sure no other human colony suffers what we suffered. No more new souls. No more dead children." On the flagship, Admiral Yoon studied the tactical display showing the Kethmoran system. The fortress was a massive structure, easily the size of a small moon. It was surrounded by defense platforms and patrolled by the largest Velkari fleet ever assembled in one place. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "the enemy has detected our approach. They're moving to intercept." "Good," Yoon replied. "I want them to see us coming. I want them to know exactly who's about to destroy them." The Velkari fleet moved out from the fortress in a massive formation. Their ships were even larger than the survivors had described. Some were over 5 kilometers long and bristled with weapon ports. They advanced with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat. War Commander Velthanor stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the approaching human fleet. He had been the one to order the destruction of the human colonies, and he felt nothing but contempt for the primitive species. How many ships do they have? He asked his tactical officer. Our sensors are detecting approximately 500,000 vessels, War Commander. They appear to be much smaller than our ships. Velthanor laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. 500,000 primitive ships against 3,000 of our finest warships? This will be over in minutes. Open fire as soon as they come within range. But Admiral Yoon had other plans. As the Velkari fleet moved to engage, he gave an order that would shock the alien commanders. All ships, execute Formation Omega, scatter and attack. Instead of meeting the Velkari in a traditional battle line, the human fleet suddenly broke apart into thousands of smaller groups. Each squadron used different tactics, attacking from multiple directions at once. Captain Soo-Jin Kim led her squadron in a direct assault on the enemy's left flank. Her ship's experimental weapons fired beams of energy that interacted with Velkari shields in ways the aliens had never seen before. Their shields are fluctuating, reported her weapons officer. The frequency modulators are working perfectly. Fire everything, Soo-Jin ordered. The Taeyang's revenge unleashed its full arsenal. Energy beams struck the Velkari ships, but instead of being deflected by their shields, the weapons somehow turned the shields themselves into weapons. The protective energy fields began collapsing inward, crushing the ships they were supposed to protect. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human squadrons demonstrated tactics the Velkari had never encountered. Some ships used kamikaze drones that could slip past enemy defenses. Others fired computer viruses disguised as sensor probes, infecting Velkari systems and turning their own weapons against them. Sergeant Major Dae-Hyun Lee watched the space battle from the hangar bay of his assault ship. Once the enemy fleet was weakened, his Marines would board the fortress itself and fight the Velkari face-to-face. First wave, prepare for launch, he ordered. We're going to show these aliens what human Marines can do. The boarding pods launched from dozens of assault ships, racing toward the massive fortress through a storm of weapons fire. Each pod carried 20 Marines equipped with the deadliest weapons humanity could design. Dae-Hyun's pod smashed through the fortress's outer hull, and his Marines poured out into the alien corridors. The Velkari defenders were tall, reptilian creatures with natural armor and razor-sharp claws, but they had never fought humans before. Move fast and hit hard, Dae-Hyun shouted as his troops advanced. Don't give them time to organize a defense. The Marines fought with a ferocity that shocked their alien opponents. Every human in the battalion had lost someone in the colony attacks, and they channeled their grief into deadly efficiency. They moved through the fortress like a force of nature, systematically destroying everything in their path. Meanwhile, the space battle was turning into a rout. The Velkari fleet, despite its size advantage, was being torn apart by human tactics they couldn't understand or counter. Ships that had conquered dozens of star systems were being destroyed by vessels a fraction of their size. War Commander Velthanor watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated around him. How are they doing this? Our ships are superior in every way. Sir, his tactical officer reported with panic in his voice. They're not fighting like any species we've encountered before. They seem to have no regard for their own losses. Some of their ships are actually ramming our vessels. It was true. Human commanders were using their ships as weapons when conventional tactics failed. They rammed Velkari vessels, detonated their own ships at point-blank range, and sacrificed themselves to create openings for their comrades. They're insane, Velthanor whispered. What kind of species fights like this? On the fortress, Dae-Hyun and his Marines had reached the command center. The Velkari officers inside were tall, imposing creatures, but they seemed confused and frightened by the intensity of the human attack. Surrender, Dae-Hyun ordered, his rifle pointed at the alien commander. Surrender and live. The Velkari officer looked at the human with obvious disgust. We do not surrender to inferior species. Then you die like the rest, Dae-Hyun replied and pulled the trigger. Within hours, the battle was over. The mighty Velkari fortress was in ruins, its defenders dead or captured. The alien fleet that had seemed so powerful was now just wreckage floating in space. Admiral Yoon stood on his bridge, watching the cleanup operations. They had won their first major victory against the Dominion, but he knew this was just the beginning. Sir, reported his communications officer, we're receiving transmissions from across Velkari space. News of our victory is spreading fast. What are they saying? The aliens are calling us the destroyers and the nightmare species. Some are demanding their government negotiate with us. Yoon smiled grimly. Good. Fear is a weapon, too. Captain Sujin Kim was conducting damage assessments on her ship when she received new orders. Instead of staying to occupy the Kethmoran system, the fleet was moving immediately to their next target. "We're not stopping," asked her executive officer. "No," Sujin replied, understanding the admiral's strategy. "We're not here to conquer territory. We're here to destroy the Velkari completely. If we stop to occupy systems, we give them time to organize a defense." The human fleet began moving toward their next target, leaving only automated defense platforms to guard the conquered system. Across Velkari space, panic was spreading as reports of the battle reached their homeworld. For the first time in their species' history, the Velkari were afraid. The humans weren't fighting like any enemy they had ever faced. They seemed driven by something beyond normal military logic, a burning desire for revenge that made them impossibly dangerous. Word spread across the galaxy that the peaceful humans had become something else entirely. They were no longer the gentle species that had reached for the stars with hope and wonder. They had transformed into something darker and more terrible. Something that was coming for the Velkari homeworld. Something that would not stop until every alien who had participated in the colony massacres was dead as the great fleet moved deeper into enemy territory. Admiral Yoon received reports from across the galaxy. Other alien species were watching the conflict with fascination and terror. Some were secretly cheering for humanity. Others were wondering if they would be next. "Sir," his aide reported, "intelligence indicates the Velkari are massing their entire fleet to defend their homeworld. They're calling in ships from across their empire." "How many ships?" The Zirian Nebula stretched across space like a massive cloud of glowing gas and cosmic dust. Inside its swirling depths, visibility was limited to just a few kilometers and most sensor systems became unreliable. For most species, it was an obstacle to be avoided. For humanity, it was the perfect battlefield. Admiral Tae Jun-yoon stood on the bridge of Earth's vengeance, studying the tactical display. The entire Velkari fleet was approaching the nebula, nearly 2 million ships carrying the full military might of their empire. Emperor Vashitar Nem himself had taken command, determined to crush the human threat once and for all. "They're coming in fast," reported his tactical officer. No attempt at stealth or clever formations, just a massive frontal assault. "Of course," Yoon replied. "They've never had to be clever. For 1,000 years, they've won battles through sheer overwhelming force." Captain Sujin Kim's voice came over the communication system from her ship. "Admiral, all squadrons are in position within the nebula. We're ready to begin Operation Ghost Storm." Yoon smiled. The operation was based on ancient submarine warfare tactics from Earth's oceans. Instead of meeting the enemy in open space, humanity would use the nebula's dense gases as cover, striking from concealment and vanishing before the Velkari could respond. "All ships, maintain communication silence," Yoon ordered. "Use quantum burst transmissions only. Make them think we're running scared." Across the human fleet, 500,000 ships powered down their main engines and drifted deeper into the nebula. Each vessel was equipped with specially designed stealth systems that made them nearly invisible in the dense cosmic fog. Emperor Vashitar Nem stood 12 feet tall, his reptilian form covered in ceremonial armor that marked his rank. He had ruled the Velkari Dominion for 3 centuries, expanding their empire and eliminating dozens of species. No enemy had ever seriously challenged his military might. "The humans are hiding in the nebula," reported his fleet commander. "Our sensors detect some ships, but the interference is making targeting difficult." "Then we go in after them," the Emperor declared. "Order all ships to enter the nebula. We'll flush out these vermin and destroy them completely. Sir, fighting in the nebula will limit our tactical advantages. Our larger ships won't be able to coordinate effectively. We have 2 million ships," Vashitar Nem roared. "They have barely 500,000. Even if half our fleet is lost to navigation errors, we'll still outnumber them 4-1. The massive Velkari armada began entering the Zirion Nebula, their formations becoming scattered as the dense gases interfered with their coordination systems. Ships that had worked together for decades suddenly found themselves operating alone in the cosmic fog. Deep within the nebula, Sergeant Major Dae-hyun Lee was preparing his Marines for the most important boarding operation in human history. His target was the Emperor's flagship, a massive dreadnought that served as the command center for the entire Velkari fleet. "Listen up," he told his assault teams. "We're not just trying to capture one ship. We're going to cut the head off the entire Velkari military. No emperor, no coordination, no organized resistance. His Marines were the best humanity could produce. Each soldier had survived dozens of boarding actions against Velkari ships, learning how to fight the alien warriors in hand-to-hand combat. They carried weapons designed specifically to punch through Velkari armor, and training that emphasized speed and aggression over caution. Remember, Daehyun continued, these aliens have never fought anyone who could seriously threaten them. They're arrogant and overconfident. We're going to use that against them. The first phase of the battle began when human sensor drones detected a Velkari battle group moving through a relatively clear section of the nebula. Captain Sujin Kim led her squadron in a surprise attack, her ships appearing out of the cosmic fog like ghosts. Fire all weapons, she ordered. Hit them hard and fast, then fade back into the nebula. The Taeyang's Revenge and her escorts unleashed a devastating barrage of energy weapons and guided missiles. The Velkari ships, caught completely off guard, barely had time to raise their shields before the human attack overwhelmed them. Enemy ships destroyed, reported her weapons officer. No survivors detected. Good. Move to the next ambush position. Across the nebula, similar attacks were taking place. Human squadrons struck from the cosmic fog, destroyed their targets, and vanished before the Velkari could organize a response. Each attack was carefully coordinated to maximize damage while revealing nothing about humanity's overall strategy. Emperor Vashatar Nem watched his fleet's casualty reports with growing frustration. How are they doing this? We can barely see them on our sensors. Sir, they seem to be using the nebula's interference to mask their movements, his tactical officer reported. Our ships are being picked off one group at a time. We've lost over 100 vessels in the past hour. Order all ships to increase scanner power. I want every human ship detected and destroyed. But increasing their scanner power only made the Velkari ships more visible to human sensors. Admiral Yoon was tracking every enemy movement from his command ship, using quantum burst communications to coordinate attacks across the entire battlefield. Squadron Gamma, you have a target of opportunity at coordinates 77 Alpha, he transmitted. 12 enemy ships isolated from their main force. The human ships moved through the nebula like a pack of predators, always striking where the enemy was weakest and least prepared. They used tactics that the Velkari had never encountered, formations that seemed to dissolve and reform at will, weapons that fired from impossible angles, and a willingness to sacrifice individual ships for strategic advantage. The breakthrough came when Daehyun Lee's assault ship managed to approach the Emperor's flagship undetected. The massive Velkari dreadnought was trying to coordinate the scattered fleet when his boarding pod slammed into its hull. Go, 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 Daehyun shouted as his Marines poured out of the pods. Secure the command deck! Don't let anyone escape. The Velkari crew fought desperately to defend their ship, but they had never faced human Marines in close combat. The humans moved with deadly precision, their weapons cutting through alien armor like it was paper. Daehyun led his squad toward the bridge, fighting his way through corridors filled with enemy soldiers. The Velkari were larger and stronger than humans, but they weren't prepared for the sheer ferocity of the Marine assault. Command deck secured, reported one of his lieutenants. We have the Emperor. Emperor Vashatar Nem stood in the center of his bridge, surrounded by human Marines. His ceremonial armor was scorched from weapons fire, and several of his officers lay dead around him. For the first time in his long life, he was facing defeat. You cannot win this war, he told Daehyun with obvious hatred. Even if you destroy this fleet, the Dominion has reserves on 1,000 worlds. We will rebuild and crush your pathetic species. Daehyun looked at the alien emperor with cold eyes. Maybe, but you won't be alive to see it. Wait, Vashatar Nem said quickly. I am valuable to you. I can order my fleets to surrender. I can give you information about our defenses. You want to surrender? Daehyun asked. The same way you let our colonists surrender before you murdered them? Before the Emperor could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The Velkari fleet, now without central coordination, was falling apart under the constant human attacks. Ships were colliding with each other in the dense nebula, firing on their own forces by mistake, and fleeing in panic. Captain Sujin Kim watched the chaos from her bridge as another Velkari battle group disintegrated under coordinated human assault. They're running, she reported to Admiral Yoon. Their formation is completely broken. Pursue and destroy, Yoon ordered. Don't let any of them escape to report our tactics. The battle became a massacre as the human fleet systematically hunted down fleeing Velkari ships. Without their Emperor's coordination, the alien forces couldn't mount any organized resistance. They were reduced to individual ships trying desperately to escape the nebula. On the captured flagship, Daehyun received orders directly from Admiral Yoon. Sergeant Major, you are authorized to secure all intelligence materials and eliminate all high-ranking prisoners. Daehyun looked at the Emperor, who was listening to the transmission with growing terror. You heard the Admiral. No prisoners. This is barbaric. Vashtar-Nem protested. Civilized species take prisoners of war. Civilized species don't murder 45 million innocent people, Daehyun replied. We learned from the best teachers. The execution was swift and final. With their Emperor dead and their fleet destroyed, the Velkari Dominion's military power was broken. The species that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years was finally facing extinction. As the battle wound down, Admiral Yoon surveyed the wreckage. Nearly 2 million Velkari ships had been destroyed, while human losses numbered less than 50,000. It was the most decisive victory in military history. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender signals from Velkari worlds across their empire. They're offering unconditional capitulation. Yoon studied the tactical display showing the locations of major Velkari worlds. Their homeworld lay just 2 jumps away, defended only by planetary defense systems, after 1,000 years of conquest. The Velkari homeworld hung in space before the human fleet like a blue-green jewel. From orbit, it looked peaceful and beautiful, with white clouds swirling over vast oceans and green continents. It was hard to believe that this world had been the center of a 1,000-year reign of terror. Admiral Taejun Yoon stood on the bridge of Earth's vengeance, reading the final orders from Earth. The message was clear and simple: complete extermination of the Velkari species. No survivors, no mercy. The same fate they had inflicted on human colonies would be their final justice. Sir, reported his tactical officer, planetary scans are complete. Population estimates show approximately 8 billion Velkari on the surface. Minimal military defenses detected. Yoon nodded silently. 8 billion lives. It would take less than an hour to turn the planet's surface into molten glass, just as the Velkari had done to New Seoul, New Busan, Terra Nova, and Cheonan Station. Captain Soo-Jin Kim was conducting her own scans from the Taeyang's Revenge. Her instruments were detecting massive cities, agricultural areas, and what appeared to be schools and hospitals. This wasn't a military world. It was a civilian population center. Captain, her science officer reported, I'm reading life signs consistent with Velkari young. Large concentrations in what appear to be educational facilities. Soo-Jin felt her stomach tighten. Children. The planet was full of children who had never participated in the colony attacks, never voted for the war, never even known that humans existed until recently. Ma'am, are we really going to... Her executive officer began, then stopped himself. I don't know, Soo-Jin admitted quietly. On the marine assault ship New Seoul's Fury, Sergeant Major Daehyun Lee was preparing his troops for what might be their final mission. Some of his Marines were arguing about the orders they had received. They murdered our families, said Corporal Hwan-Seok-jung, a survivor from Terra Nova. Every one of them deserves to die. But what about their children? Asked Private Subin Lee, who had joined the Marines after losing her parents in the New Busan attack. They didn't choose this war. Daehyun had been struggling with the same question. For 2 years, hatred had driven him forward, given him strength during the darkest moments of the war. But now, standing on the edge of genocide, he wasn't sure what he believed anymore. Form up, he ordered his troops. We're going down to the surface. The first landing shuttles descended through the planet's atmosphere, carrying human forces to secure key military installations. What they found surprised them. The Velkari weren't preparing for a final battle. They were huddled in their homes, waiting for death. Daehyun's shuttle landed in the capital city near the planetary government center. As his Marines emerged, they found streets filled with alien civilians who looked nothing like the fierce warriors they had fought in space. The adult Velkari were tall and reptilian, but many seemed old or weak. Worse, there were young ones, smaller versions of the adults who clung to their parents with obvious terror. One small Velkari child may be equivalent to a human 10-year-old, stared at Daehyun with wide, frightened eyes. "Sergeant Major," his radio crackled. "This is Bravo Squad. We've secured the government building. The planetary leaders want to surrender formally." Daehyun looked at the alien child, then at his Marines. Many of them were staring at the Valkyrie civilians with expressions of confusion and doubt. These weren't the monsters from their nightmares, they were just people, scared and helpless. "All squads hold position," he ordered. "Wait for further instructions." On the flagship, Admiral Yoon was receiving similar reports from across the planet. Human forces had landed without resistance, securing every major city and military installation. The Valkyrie were offering complete surrender, begging only that their children be spared. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "President Kang is requesting a direct channel." The image of President Mi-young Kang appeared on the main screen. She looked older than when the war had started, her face lined with stress and exhaustion. "Admiral, what's the situation?" "Complete victory, Madam President. The planet is ours. Their military is destroyed. Their government is surrendering unconditionally. We can begin the final bombardment on your order." President Kang was silent for a long moment. "Admiral, I need you to answer a question honestly. What kind of species will we become if we murder 8 billion civilians? The same kind of species that murdered 45 million of ours," Yoon replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," the president said quietly. "We'll become something worse. Because we had a choice and they didn't." Captain Soo-jin Kim was monitoring the conversation from her ship when she received an urgent transmission from one of the surface teams. "Captain, this is Lieutenant Park. You need to see this." The lieutenant's video feed showed a large building that had been converted into a memorial. Inside, there were displays about the human colonies and the people who had died in the attacks. But these weren't celebrations. They were expressions of grief and shame. "Ma'am, this appears to be some kind of peace memorial. The translations suggest it was built by Valkyrie who opposed the war. There were resistance movements here that tried to stop the attacks." Soo-jin stared at the screen. Not all Valkyrie had supported the genocide. Some had tried to prevent it, had spoken out against their government's actions. Those voices had been silenced by Emperor Vashtar Nem's dictatorship. On the surface, Daehyun was approached by an elderly Valkyrie who walked slowly forward with his hands raised in surrender. The alien spoke in broken English, apparently learned recently. "Please," the old Valkyrie said. "I know. Your people dead. My people did terrible thing. But children here, they not choose war. Please, mercy for children." Daehyun looked into the alien's eyes and saw something he hadn't expected. Genuine remorse. This creature understood what his species had done and he was ashamed of it. "Where were you when our colonies burned?" Daehyun asked harshly. "I try to stop," the alien replied with difficulty. "Many of us try. Emperor, not listen now. We pay price. Is justice. But children—" The old Valkyrie gestured to a group of young aliens hiding behind a damaged building. They were clearly terrified, clinging to each other like human children might during a disaster. Admiral Yoon's personal communicator chimed with an urgent message from Earth. It was from Ha-yoon Park, Governor Hyunwoo Park's daughter who had survived the New Seoul massacre. She was now 22 years old and working as a civilian analyst for the fleet. "Admiral," her message read, "I've been monitoring the surface reports. My father died trying to protect innocent people. If we murder innocent children now, his death means nothing. We'll have become the very monsters he died fighting against." The Admiral sat in his command chair, surrounded by displays showing the most powerful fleet in galactic history. With a single word, he could end the Valkyrie species forever. It would be justice for the 45 million humans who had died. It would ensure that no other species would ever threaten humanity, but it would also mean becoming something that the dead humans would have hated. "All ships," Admiral Yoon said finally. "Stand down from bombardment positions." "Sir?" his tactical officer asked in confusion. "I said stand down. Signal all surface forces to begin securing and cataloging Valkyrie government and military installations. Prepare for occupation, not extermination." Captain Soo-jin Kim felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Admiral, are we taking prisoners?" "No, Captain. We're taking responsibility for our enemies. There's a difference." The decision sent shockwaves through the human fleet. Some officers protested, demanding that the original orders be carried out. But Admiral Yoon's authority was absolute, and most of the fleet recognized the wisdom in his choice. Sergeant Major Dae-hyun Lee gathered his Marines and explained the new mission. "We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to make sure this never happens again. The Velkari military is finished, their government is dissolved, and their empire is over. But we're not going to murder children." Some of his Marines were angry, feeling that justice demanded complete extinction of their enemies. Others were relieved that they wouldn't have to participate in a massacre. But all of them followed orders, beginning the complex process of occupying and rebuilding an alien civilization. The transformation of the Velkari Dominion took 5 years. Human administrators worked with reformed Velkari leaders to establish new governments based on peaceful principles. The massive military infrastructure was dismantled, and the resources were redirected toward reconstruction and reparations. Captain Soo-jin Kim, now promoted to admiral, oversaw the construction of New Seoul Memorial Station in orbit, around the former Velkari homeworld. The massive space station served as both a memorial to the human dead and a symbol of humanity's choice to build rather than destroy. The dedication ceremony was attended by representatives from dozens of species across the galaxy. The human decision to show mercy had shocked the entire galactic community and established humanity as a moral leader among spacefaring civilizations. Ha-Yoon Park, now a colonel in the new Terran Hegemony Defense Force, served as the station's first commander. She stood before a memorial wall listing the names of everyone who had died in the colony attacks, including her father. "We remember not just how they died," she said in her speech,